Thanks for joining us on Planet America. I'm John Barron.
And I'm Charlie Licciardello, and we certainly have a situation this week.
In the wake of the murder of Charlie Kirk, tensions are flaring.
The president is angry, and he is once again blaming the left for the murder of Charlie Kirk.
This is a dark moment for America.
Well, some Democrats and liberal pundits reacting in downright horrific ways to Charlie Kirk's assassination.
Shock, fear and anger after one of the president's closest advisors, conservative activist and organiser Charlie Kirk, is shot and killed.
And the finger-pointing began before anyone other than the killer even knew who'd done this. We're going to have all the latest and speak to the author of a book about Kirk and the conservative youth movement that he led. But first,
the murder of conservative activist Charlie Kirk last week has revealed the depth of the divide in American politics and society. In the 33 hours between Kirk's shooting at Utah Valley University and his alleged assassin being reported to police and arrested, calls for an end to political violence were overwhelmed by a premature blame game.
For years, those on the radical left have compared wonderful Americans like Charlie to Nazis and the world's worst mass murderers and criminals. This kind of rhetoric is directly responsible for the terrorism that we're seeing in our country today.
The president then announced he was awarding Kirk America's highest civilian honour, the Presidential Medal of Freedom, and he ordered all flags in America to be lowered to half-mast, even though he only has the power to order flags on federal buildings down. Republican House Speaker Mike Johnson had this tribute.
The chair would ask that all members present in the chamber and those in the gallery please rise for a moment of prayer for Charlie Kirk and his family.
Which they dutifully did, but after a minute's silent prayer, an argument erupted.
Wait a minute. The House will be in order. The House will be in order.
Republican Lauren Boebert asked the House to say out loud a prayer for Charlie Kirk. Some Democrats objected, shouting why House members hadn't prayed for the kids in Colorado, children killed in a recent school shooting there. Republican Anna Paulina Luna, a friend of Kirk's, then yelled back at the Democrats, "You caused this." It was all very unedifying stuff, but nothing compared to some of the vitriol on the internet. Kirk had been accused by some of anti-Semitism, and that's probably why social media was soon buzzing with a conspiracy theory that Israel was behind the Kirk assassination. Ian Carroll, described by the Jewish Anti-Defamation League as an anti-Zionist ex-influencer with over 1 million followers, claimed that Israel murdered him in front of his family. That post alone was shared literally millions of times, and the Israeli Prime Minister was even asked about it.
I think it's so absurd, so stupid and so ridiculous. You can't believe that people are saying that.
yeah, not a lot of evidence for that theory, John, but I do think it's worth going back to that initial Trump reaction you detailed just for a second to highlight this was only hours after Kirk got shot, and Trump's job at that point is to unify the country and calm America down. And the way he chose to do that was to assert without evidence that what he calls the radical left, that usually means Democrats, was directly responsible for Kirk's death. And he promised to go after them all, including their funding sources. In particular, he said it was because of the names that they called him. So he was kind of saying it's super unfair and wrong to call Trump a dictator, but if you do, he'll investigate you and punish you for your speech. Go figure. And that's not even getting into the hypocrisy of it all.
We will drive out the globalists, we will cast out the communists, Marxists and fascists, and we will throw off the sick political class that hates our country.
For the record, there have been 3,600 people murdered in politically motivated terrorist attacks over the last 50 years, according to the Cato Institute, and right-wingers were responsible for 391 of them, whereas left-wingers were responsible for 65 of them. There have been a number of studies about this, each with different data, but they all point to the fact the president is wrong about this left-wing epidemic. Okay, what about other reactions? Well, on social media, there were a bunch of appalling reactions from no-named lefty trolls.
We got Charlie in the neck. We got Charlie in the neck.
Ding dong, the witch is dead. To everyone saying that it was such a senseless, violent act. I want you to remind yourself that it was God's plan. Charlie Kirk got shot and he's dead!
But to be fair, amongst the high-profile left, they were pretty much universally respectful, like Gavin Newsom, for instance, tweeting that Charlie Kirk's murder is sick and reprehensible and his thoughts were with Kirk's family, children and loved ones. The only high-profile anti-Trumper who pushed it a bit, I thought, was analyst and MSNBC Republican Matthew Dowd, who seemed to be blaming Kirk for his own death.
He's been one of the most divisive, especially divisive younger figures in this, who is constantly sort of pushing this sort of hate speech or sort of aimed at certain groups. And I always go back to hateful thoughts lead to hateful words, which then lead to hateful actions.
And MSNBC sacked him for that anyway. By contrast, high-profile Republican figures were kind of letting it rip. This was House Representative Bob Onder.
Some of the American left are undoubtedly well-meaning people, but their ideology is pure evil. They hate the good, the truth, and the beautiful, and embrace the evil, the false, and the ugly. And they literally will kill those with whom they disagree, just as their predecessor leftists Marx and Stalin and Lenin and Pol Pot and Fidel Castro did.
That was quite a list, and there are heaps of high-profile right-wingers talking about a civil war, including Fox's Jesse Waters.
They are at war with us. Whether we want to accept it or not, they are at war with us. What are we going to do about it? How much political violence are we going to tolerate?
By the way, he was not sacked, John. No one even called for it.
Is it too late? I can call for it. Among the most absurd speculation was this from the president's eldest son, Donald Trump Jr., who was a friend of Charlie Kirk.
I can't frankly name a mass shooting in the last year or two in America that wasn't committed by, a transgender lunatic that's been pumped up on probably hormones since they were 3-year-olds.
Don Jr. can't name a mass shooting not conducted by a transgender person? OK, a quick fact check on that. Experts say that transgender people may have been responsible for 7 out of 4,147 mass shootings from 2018 to 2025, a rate of less than 1/5 of 1%. For context, transgender people represent around 1% of the American population, so they are 5 times less likely than anybody else to be a shooter, Don.
Honestly, it got way worse than Don Jr. MAGA influencer Joey Manorino showcased such shocking bigotry to his 600,000 followers that even Elon's ex throttled him. He posted, "If the person who killed Charlie Kirk was transgender, there can be no mercy for that species any longer. We've already tolerated far too much from those creatures," he said. 2 weeks ago, I called for transgenders to be rounded up, detained and studied, he said, due to their propensity for mass murder. I'm not easily shocked, John, but that was something else.
Yeah, it sure was. I suppose, to be fair, these are all the comments of people feeling an understandable sense of shock, outrage, grief and anger, and none more so, of course, than Kirk's widow, Erika, who issued a eulogistic statement from her husband's podcast studio, speaking of her love for Charlie and their deeply held Christian faith.
I will never, ever have the words to describe the loss that I feel in my heart. I honestly have no idea what any of this means. I know that God does, but I don't.
She also had this warning.
The evildoers responsible for my husband's assassination have no idea what they have done. They killed Charlie because he preached a message of patriotism, faith, and of God's merciful love.
Of course, there are many people who do not see Charlie Kirk as somebody who preached merciful love. To them, he was someone who helped Donald Trump craft messages of bigotry, intolerance, racial resentment, fear and even hate.
Allegedly, Haitians are going around and taking people's pets and eating them. And the Civil Rights Act, though, let's be clear, created a beast, and that beast has now turned into an anti-white weapon. I'm sorry, If I see a black pilot, I'm going to be like, boy, I hope he's qualified. Kamala Harris seeks to kidnap your child via the trans agenda.
Now, look, those were some pretty short grabs. Some of them sound better with more context, but you could also have picked 20 other grabs as well, so I'm not going to nitpick there. What I would say, though, is yes, Kirk was much loved. Turning Point has a presence on 3,500 campuses these days. His podcast, one of the most successful political podcasts in the country. Yet, for someone who was all about the free exchange of ideas, it was strange that he used that popularity to create a watch list of college professors and lecturers that he felt were too leftist for his tastes. And this list was designed so readers of that list could contact the colleges about those professors. And it quickly turned into a vehicle for mass harassment and violent threats. So he wasn't necessarily 100% consistent, John.
No, and beyond his personal appearances, his radio shows and podcasts, Charlie Kirk was a very valuable political asset, spearheading Trump's appeal to younger voters last year. He was personally very close to members of the Trump family, like another son. According to Don Jr., Kirk was also a friend of J.D. Vance and reportedly helped convince Donald Trump to make Vance his vice presidential running mate last year. That might explain why Vance himself went to Utah over the weekend to escort Kirk's body back home to Arizona. So there is a very personal aspect to this. Here's how President Trump described the moment last Wednesday when he was told what had happened.
And they came in, they said, Charlie Kirk is dead. I didn't know what they meant. I said, what do you mean dead? Charlie Kirk was shot. And they thought he was dead because it was so horrific, you know. And they said, dead.
He was quite emotional there, John, but Trump wasn't always so emotional when asked about Kirk.
My condolences on the loss of his friend, Charlie Kirk. Can I ask you a question? How are you holding up over the last 3.5 days?
I think very good. And by the way, right there, you see all the trucks. They've just started construction of the new ballroom for the White House, which is something they've been trying to get, as you know, for about 150 years. And it's going to be a beauty. It'll be an absolutely magnificent structure.
To be fair, I hear it's going to be a very moving ballroom.
So much gold paint. Trump gave an hour-long live interview on Fox News on Friday morning, and that was when he also broke the news that a suspect was in custody.
With a high degree of certainty, we have him.
And then, once again, instead of seeking to heal a divided nation, as presidents historically do in such times, Donald Trump was Donald Trump.
The radicals on the left are the problem, and they're vicious, and they're horrible, and they're politically savvy. Although they want men and women sports, they want transgender for everyone, they want open borders.
That's the thing about Trump, John. He keeps being Trump.
We have a great country. We have radical left lunatics out there, and we just have to beat the hell out of them.
He's bringing everyone together, John.
Is that what it is? So, what do we actually know about Kirk's alleged killer at this point, Chaz?
Well, we know that 22-year-old Tyler Robinson came from a seemingly happy family. He was the son of a long-time sheriff's deputy who apparently recognised his son in the pictures released by the FBI and then actually compelled his own son to turn himself in. We also know that Robinson was a promising, bright high school honours student, but he only attended uni for one semester back in 2021 before he started drifting away. So, was he a victim of COVID-era malaise? Maybe? We don't know. Either way, there are 3 theories doing the rounds about what this guy's story is. One, that he was apolitical completely, and he shot Kirk as part of maybe an online lark. The evidence of this includes that he was registered as unaffiliated with any party, and his voter records indicate that Robinson didn't even bother to vote in the 2024 election. Furthermore, the fired bullet casing found on the scene was inscribed with the phrase, "Notices bulges, oh whoa, what's this?" Sounds a bit odd. It's a niche online trolling reference to flirting within the furry community of all things. Other cases were inscribed with hyper-online references as well, including a series of arrows that match the input required to drop a bomb in the game Helldivers 2. Another case was engraved with the trollish phrase, "If you read this, you are gay, LMAO." So the bullet casings are less a sign of political affiliation and more a sign that the shooter was just super online. Another bullet roller case was inscribed with "Oh Bella Ciao, Bella Ciao, Bella Ciao, Ciao, Ciao." Once again, strange, but it's a reference to an anti-fascist anthem sung by Italians after World War II, and also a troll song online. Also, when he was younger, Robinson lived so much of his life on the internet that by age 15, he was dressing up as Pepe the Meme Frog for Halloween. Here's a photo there proving it. That's Pepe on the right, in case you're wondering. Now, the left have said, hang on, Pepe isn't just any meme. Pepe's the favoured meme of the far right. And that Ciao Bella song, that's not just favoured by any trolls, but by right-wing trolls. The song appears on the Spotify playlist for the so-called Groypers. They're the followers of Nick Fuentes, a white nationalist personality who has famously criticised Charlie Kirk constantly. And finally, Robinson's entire family are registered Republicans. So the left is saying, look, this guy is not just a troll, he's a far-right Republican. And then finally you got the right saying, hang on, he's obviously from the left. For one thing, the Utah governor described Robinson as deeply indoctrinated with leftist ideology. But what about Robinson's Republican family?
He does come from a conservative family, but his ideology was very different than his family. There clearly was a leftist ideology with this assassin.
Robinson's family also told investigators about a conversation Robinson had just before Kirk came to Utah.
The family member referenced a recent incident in which Robinson came to dinner prior to September 10th, and in the conversation with another family member, Robinson mentioned Charlie Kirk was coming to UVU. They talked about why they didn't like him and the viewpoints that he had. The family member also stated Kirk was full of hate and spreading hate.
And finally, there was what conservatives feel might be the missing piece in the puzzle of Robinson's life.
The roommate that we had originally talked about, we can confirm that roommate is a boyfriend who is transitioning from male to female, so we know that piece. I will say that person has been very cooperative with authorities.
Now, Governor Cox is very clear that Robinson's boyfriend was not an accomplice at all. In fact, he was helping out the investigators. But there is some suspicion that Robinson's anger about Kirk's anti-trans views could be a motive for Charlie Kirk's murder. Now, look, this is very early days, John. We have no idea where this is going, but given some of that anti-trans messaging we mentioned before, I think a number of people are quite nervously waiting to see what the next shoe to drop might be.
Yeah, it's all being treated as a bit of a game of Cluedo at the moment. For more, we're joined by journalist Kyle Spencer. She's author of Raising Them Right, about the rise of Charlie Kirk and the conservative youth movement in America. Kyle, welcome to Planet America. I wonder, from your experience with him, what was it about Charlie Kirk that saw him rise to such a position of influence and power by the relatively young age of 31 when he died?
So Charlie had a very, very unusual mix of talents. He was incredibly charismatic, incredibly able to connect with people of all different ages. He had a real sense of where power was, where political power was, and how to gravitate towards it. And then finally, I would say that he was, and I've interviewed people for 20 plus years, and I would say that Charlie Kirk was the most ambitious person I had ever interviewed. His ambition was really extraordinary.
Talking about that ambition, what do you say to those who believe Kirk was odds on to be a future presidential nominee, possibly even president? How likely do you think that would have been?
So in my book, Raising Them Right, I talked about this possibility that Charlie could be a future president. He always refused to say whether or not that was in the cards for him. But I think that people in the party believed that he definitely had much of what it took to do that. Whether Charlie would have been able to transcend the national stage, not so much, he was a national figure, but whether or not Charlie was able to lure in moderate voters, progressive voters enough to create a coalition to win an election is unclear to me. But I think he thought about it. I also think he really loved being the influencer that he was, the kind of, he's a brilliant strategist. I think he loved strategizing, and also think he loved doing his podcast. He loved being a personality. So I'm not 100% sure that would have been the route that he would definitely go in, but I know that there was a lot of talk about it.
And Kyle, some have said that without Charlie Kirk, Donald Trump wouldn't have won enough younger voters to win last year's election. Others have said he was key to J.D. Vance becoming Trump's running mate. How much of that do you think is true?
So Charlie Kirk had a very close relationship with President Trump. His son, John Jr., introduced him to Charlie, and they're very similar in a lot of ways. Both of those men are very, Charlie was very charismatic. Trump is very charismatic. Charlie really understood how to talk to people, how to understand where their pain points were. Trump as well really understands that. Charlie was a great strategist. Trump is a great strategist. So there was an affinity between the two of them, I think, from the beginning. Charlie was also incredibly loyal. No matter what you thought about his politics, a lot of his rhetoric was very hateful. That aside, I know that the number of people that were with him early on stayed with him throughout the years. He had an ability to stay very, very, very loyal to Trump. And you think about the fact that Trump has alienated most of the people that have been with him over the years, and not Charlie, which I don't think speaks about Trump. I think it speaks about Charlie. So Charlie had that influence over Trump. He had the likability aspect, but then he had the ability, the access, and he was in the White House all the time. He was advising Trump, talking to Trump. He had a really collegial, almost equal relationship with him by the time he died. And then in terms of his ability to corral the youth votes, the thing about Charlie was early on, 2012, he knew that he wanted to be the person that rebranded the American GOP. Slowly but surely, with the help of other people, with lots and lots of money funneled to him, was able to create this vision for the Republican Party as a very welcoming, exciting, inclusive place for young Americans of all colors. And that's, considering that was also coupled with a lot of Charlie's very hateful rhetoric that was very disparaging of Black people, very disparaging at times of Latinos, it's an unbelievable feat.
On Kirk's rhetoric, he had a reputation for being a bit of a performer, or maybe even a grifter, saying whatever he needed to say to get by. Do you think that's true, or do you think he was a true believer in what he advocated for?
Yeah, I think that Charlie was a true believer. I think Charlie was able to make tremendous amount of money and benefit greatly personally from the beliefs he had. I do believe he held those beliefs. Charlie, interestingly enough, went to a high school in the suburbs of Chicago that had originally been a mostly white high school. But while he was there, it flipped to a mostly Black and brown high school. So Charlie found himself suddenly in the middle of high school, a minority. And his peers were mostly liberal. They were progressive, and they liked Obama. And Charlie has never really spoken about how that may have affected his views about race in America, power in America, but it is clear to me that it had an impact on him. So I think that a lot of his rhetoric was very true and very real in how he felt. Charlie felt like, and spoke often about the ways in which he saw racism really be a problem for white people. White people, in Charlie's view, were victims of racism, of a kind of overpowering of this country by people of color. Again, he went to a high school which literally went from mostly white to mostly kids of color. So that was a very real thing for him. When he said things about Black women and his thoughts that Black women were often in positions of power, not because they were at all competent, but because they've been put there through diversity initiatives. He believed that. He truly believed that.
Kyle Spencer, we appreciate your insights into Charlie Kirk this week. Thanks for taking the time for us.
Thank you.
Now, within weeks of Donald Trump's inauguration, he was pushing immigration officials to arrest record numbers of migrants. And as those arrests ramped up, detention centres became increasingly overcrowded. So what's Trump's solution? Melina Wicks explains in the briefing room.
When Trump got back in charge, he inherited the largest immigrant detention system in the world. He wants to double it. That's because you need detention beds if you're going to deport people. And as Trump put it, I love the smell of deportations in the morning, because Apocalypse Now is a film about a war that went famously well. Luckily for Trump, there are a bunch of Republican state governors who are rushing to help him out. It started with Florida.
It's known as Alligator Alcatraz, which is very appropriate because I looked outside and that's not a place I want to go hiking anytime soon.
That's not saying much from a guy who thinks exercise will literally kill you. Alligator Alcatraz has been accused of appalling conditions, including worms in the food and wastewater on the floor. The soft-sided tents are also in an area swarming with over 7 billion mosquitoes. And that is a real scientific estimate and not just how I feel whenever I'm forced to go outside in summer. Despite the bad headlines and multiple lawsuits, other states are keen to get their own versions.
The next confirmed ICE detention center is in Indiana. It's being dubbed the Speedway Slammer.
Indiana, come for the Indy 500, stay because you've just been arrested for looking Hispanic. Next, it was Nebraska's turn with what they call the Cornhusker Clink. It's hard to imagine this getting much stupider. So just as well, we don't have to imagine it.
The Department of Homeland Security actually posting this photo announcing it on social media today.
That's ridiculous. If they were real ICE officers, they'd be wearing masks. And not to be outdone, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis has announced 2 more facilities, the Deportation Depot and the Panhandle Pokey. Deportation Depot doesn't even have anything to do with Florida. At least call it DeSantis's dungeon. It's not clear if any of these arrangements are actually legal, given they're state-run centers and immigration is a federal responsibility. But so far, DeSantis has prevailed in court. He even posted a video in celebration. Hey, Ron, just make sure you do a very normal, natural-looking smile at the end, okay?
And we're going to continue leading the way when it comes to immigration enforcement.
I don't know if these guys are trying to be menacing or funny. And to be honest, I'm not sure they know either. But it'd be nice if the administration and their allies spent a little more time ensuring that immigration detention facilities are humane and not locking up the wrong people, and a little less time thinking about how to turn prisons into memes. If nothing else, surely we can agree alliteration isn't nearly as funny as politicians think it is.
And finally, the US House Oversight Committee has an interesting task force on the declassification of federal secrets, digging into all sorts of unexplained, controversial and conspiratorial things, including the Kennedy assassinations and what the US government calls UAPs and what pretty much everyone else calls UFOs. The task force claims the federal government has failed to provide adequate information to Americans on the existence and effectiveness of programs related to UAPs. At the heart of this is the still unanswered question: what are these objects seen with the naked eye by dozens of members of the US Armed Forces, buzzing Navy ships and air bases, and captured on declassified or leaked video? Is it hypersonic technology from an earthbound adversary like China, or possibly something from out of this world? Either way, members of this committee want the potential threat taken more seriously. And a number of the videos shown to the committee have been seen publicly before, including the US Navy's famous Tic Tac footage. But Republican Congressman Eric Burleson of Missouri had something new.
This video is of an MQ-9 drone tracking an orb, or this object, off the coast of Yemen. You'll see that another MQ-9 launched a Hellfire missile.
Congressman Burleson then asked expert witness and veteran TV reporter George Knapp what he made of that.
That's a Hellfire missile smacking into that UFO and just bounced right off. And it kept going.
It kept going, and it looks like the debris was taken with it.
Yeah, what the hell is that?
What indeed? And Task Force Chair Anna Paulina Luna had this simple question.
Does this video scare you guys? Yes or no?
Yes.
Wiggins?
Yes.
Nat?
I had a different reaction. I was really happy that it got out.
Next, this committee is going to turn their attention to the 1968 Martin Luther King assassination. It is easy to dismiss this task force. Some of its members, including Lauren Boebert and Nancy Mace, have been known to engage in some pretty wacky conspiracy theories, but we'll see what they come up with next. But that is all for another trip to Planet America. We'll see you back here at the same time next week and on demand anytime on ABC iView, YouTube and Facebook.
And do not forget Friday night's Weekend Edition on ABC News. That's also on iView and online when you like. See you there.
Bye-bye.